Let me guess, you've been so excited because you finally got in your sewing machine, but you have no idea where to begin. Because I'm right there with you. A sewing machine is a little intimidating with all the different buttons and dials and knobs and attachments. There's just so much to know. But don't worry, I'm gonna walk with you step by step, unboxing this sewing machine and showing you what all the different buttons and features mean and how to use it. All of this beginner friendly. So what I'll be using today is the Baby Lock Jubilant, and I'll try to keep it as basic as possible because all sewing machines are a little different here and there. Straight out of the box, you will notice your machine, of course, your power cord to turn it on, your presser foot, a little accessory pack, a manual, and all the instructions you would ever need. And for the Jubilant is a little attachment to show your stitch selections. The first thing that you're gonna wanna do is plug in the power cord. And there's a little switch on the side that turns it on. And we've got power. Then you want to take your presser foot and plug that in as well. This is basically the engine for your needle, which it's not going to let me do that because there's a safety feature on it and the presser foot is up. So you see it stitching. You have the option to add this little stitch selector or just look at the one already on the sewing machine. But again, all sewing machines are different. Yours might not have this. A little bonus that I didn't tell you about is most sewing machines come with a little secret compartment right here. If you open it, you'll be able to store stuff, and voila! The sewing machine, as with most of them, have some more accessories. You have several different feet options. These are called bobbins, and you're gonna wanna actually get more of these at some point because bobbins are gonna go right here for your bottom stitch. Because when you're sewing, it technically takes 2 stitches to form a whole one. You'll have your top stitch and your bottom stitch, and they interlock together to form a whole stitch. So as I said, your bobbin is for your bottom stitch. And the reason that you're gonna want multiple is because as you start creating more and more projects, you're gonna want different color stitches. So this one could be a green bottom stitch. This could be a red bottom stitch. And having these wound up and ready to go for whatever color that you need for what project you're sewing on is gonna save you a lot of time, having them already wound up for you in that color preference. For now, we can put these back in their little hideaway and close it on up. Now, what does all of these little things mean? There's buttons here, there's all kinds of craziness going on here, there's this weird thing up here. Starting from here and going to this side, I'm gonna explain all of it. Right here, you have your hand wheel, and this manually moves the needle up and down. Super big, important tip that you don't wanna miss with the hand wheel is that you always want to turn it towards you. So if you notice here, this is gonna make the needle go up and down. Now, it will also move if you turn it the opposite way, but if you have thread in there, it's gonna end up getting bunched up in your machine, and we don't want that to happen. Up here, we have the bobbin winder. I'll show you how to use that in just a bit. This hiding back here is your upper thread. It might look a little different on your machine depending on what you have. Some of them lay down horizontally like this, some of them are vertical. This one you'll just lift up, put your thread on, thread it through the machine, and you're good to go. And I'll show that in just a little bit. You'll see a little diagram showing you how to thread your specific machine somewhere over here. Once you get the hang of it on your machine, it kind of becomes second nature, but that's always there for you in case you forget. You'll just follow the numbered patterns, 1, 2, 3, so on and so on. This is your tension dial. This could be a whole video on its own, but basically it keeps your stitches balanced. On average, I would suggest that you start at number 4. Coming down here on the Jubilant, this is your reverse stitch. You want to use a reverse stitch to lock in your stitches. So as you're sewing, you'll begin sewing for a couple of stitches and then reverse back and then go forward again to create kind of a safety lock. If you don't want to use a reverse stitch, you can use the lock stitch and it'll stay in place and put 4 stitches in your fabric. This is the needle up, needle down button. If you press it, it's going to push your needle up. And it's also a good way to make sure that your needle is all the way up for when you're threading the machine so that your take-up lever is at its highest position, because that's very important when threading your machine, which we will get into in just a little bit. And then you can press it again to put it back into your fabric. This is your speed control. This is the slowest. This is somewhere in the middle. and then the fastest speed. As you're just getting used to your sewing machine, I would start at the slowest speed, but honestly, once you start getting the hang of it, it's actually a little bit easier to sew, a little bit faster. So don't be too afraid to go at least at the medium speed. Over here is your menu for all sorts of customization. Right here is your stitch selector. As you get more comfortable with sewing, you might want to customize your sewing projects with different types of stitches, and you can select them using this dial. These two graphics are your stitch length and your stitch width. You can make longer stitch lengths, shorter stitch lengths, and then same with your width. A 2.5 stitch length and a 3.5 stitch width are pretty average, so I would stick with those when you're first starting out. This is your twin needle stitch, and this is the automatic reverse stitch. Coming along in this area, you have your needle and your presser foot. This is your presser foot lever right here, and by pushing it up, you push your foot up too. Now, as I showed you before, there are many different presser feet that you can choose from depending on the project that you're sewing. And to change them out, you can press this little button back here that drops your presser foot off. Make sure that your needle is up, and you can take that foot out. Some presser feet you have to do manually with a screwdriver. Your needle comes out by turning this knob, taking it out, and sliding a brand new one in. I'm gonna plop this presser foot right back on there. I'm just gonna set it right down here, try to get it aligned. Make sure that you press the button back here to open up the clamp, and there your presser foot is ready to go. Right below your presser foot are what are called feed dogs. These are what help move your fabric as you're sewing. You can drop your feed dogs if you want to do free motion sewing so that your fabric glides around a little easier, but we usually like to keep them up to make your sewing experience a little more controlled. Right here is your needle plate, and you'll notice all kinds of different numbers. These are your measurements for your seam allowance. And your seam allowance is basically measured from the end of your fabric to your needle. The most common seam allowance measurement is 1/4 inch, and that basically means that from the needle to the edge of your fabric is 1/4 inch. If you want to make sure that you're spot on, you can use a ruler, make sure that your needle is down, and just measure from the end of your fabric to your needle to make sure that the measurement is right. This right here is the home for your bobbin. You can open this by pushing this little lever here. Now on this machine, this is called a top loading bobbin, but some machines have what's called a front loading bobbin, which you'll see right along here. If you're unsure about that, I highly recommend getting out your manual. It explains step by step very specifically on how to wind your bobbin on your machine, and it also goes into the different stitches that you can select and other things that you might be curious about that I'm not covering in this video. So I'll take that off, and I've already got a little bobbin in there, and we'll wind this up here in just a little bit. Right here is your start and stop button. Let's try using most of these features and sew something. If you want to practice with me, get 2 pieces of scrap fabric and follow along. Let's go. We're gonna load our bobbin now with some red thread because I just want it to show up for you when we sew. We need to take the spool top off the spindle. You're gonna take your spool of thread. You want it to be kind of like how you put toilet paper on your roll. Have the thread come from the back. Put it on your spindle. Then you're gonna see 2 different diagrams, one for winding your bobbin and one for threading your upper thread. If you follow the dotted lines, that's for your bobbin. The straight line is for your upper thread. So we're gonna take our thread and start at number 1. Follow the dotted line to number 2, which is going around this. Then if you see here, I want you to loop it around this little bar sticking out for number 3. Go around, and this is gonna give it some tension. Circling around this. And the dotted lines want us to go this way for our bobbin. We're gonna take the end of this thread, and you'll notice in your bobbin little holes. You wanna poke it through one of those holes like this. And I also want to add that different machines do use different kinds of bobbins, so you want to consult your user manual to figure out which type of bobbin you need. With our thread sticking up, we're going to slide this onto our bobbin winder. Boop. Keep holding on to your thread and push this to lock it. Making sure that you don't let go of this string, we're going to press down on our presser foot and start winding our bobbin. When you get a little bit of thread wound on there, you can cut this. If you don't, it might get tangled all up in here. You also want to make sure to check that it's threading evenly from top to bottom. If you watch this, the thread is going to kind of move up and down. You'll notice the thread getting closer and closer to here. And now we can snip our thread, slide our bobbin back and take it off. And there you go. Now I just want to install our bobbin under our needle plate. So we'll open this. You want your thread to be facing the left. Drop it in and then follow these guides. I'm gonna loop my thread right through here and around. And this machine has a little thread cutter at the end. You can close the case. And now we can do the top thread. I will be changing the top thread color to black, just so that when I sew a project, you can see the difference from the top and the bottom. So I'm gonna change this out. I'm gonna snip it from here. And one thing that's very important is to never pull your thread up through the machine this way. You want it to come from either here or down below where your needle is. If you pull your thread up through the machine, it might cause a lot of frizz and get little thread hairs throughout your machine that could mess it up over time. I will get rid of this, place my spool cap back on, which I didn't use it for the bobbin, but that's okay. And then we'll follow our guides. So for number 1 on this machine is through this little hook. Number 2 is around this back here. And then number 3, instead of going this way like we did for a bobbin, we have to come straight down here. We'll loop it around just as it asks. And then if you look really closely, there's a lever right here, and this is your take-up lever. It's very important that you make sure that it hooks on to your thread. So it shows me right here, number 4 is wanting to loop around here, around the take-up lever. And as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, you can press your needle up, needle down button to make sure it's at its highest position. And I can tell that it's looped in there. So I'm gonna come down here to number 5. And number 6 is kind of hiding back here. It's kind of like little crisscross little blades, and it can be a little difficult to get your thread through. So I like to hold the thread with both fingers and then push it through. Kind of like you're flossing your teeth. Number 7 is up here. We wanna make sure that it comes through this little notch, around to number 7. And then if your machine has a thread cutter, it's gonna be on the side. So you can bring this up and cut your thread. Now we want to get the thread into the needle. On the Jubilant, we have this lever here for the needle threader, and I'll just press it and it'll thread it for me. You'll grab the thread from behind the needle and pull it out, but make sure that you're not pulling this part of the thread because it'll pull it right out of the eye of the needle. If you want to do it manually, just get up close and personal and put it through the eye. And there we go. You've got your top thread and your bottom thread. Now what we wanna do is you can either hit your needle up, down, or we can turn our hand wheel. I'm gonna lift my presser foot up so I can see more of what I'm doing. Now the needle is gonna pick up the bobbin thread. And if I pull this out back here, you will start to see the thread underneath. One of my absolute favorite tools are these bent tweezers because they can get really difficult to reach places. But you'll pull your bottom thread out, and then when you're sewing, make sure that everything is in the back. I just picked 2 kind of random fabrics, and something that you'll notice on patterns is what's called the right side and the wrong side. So when you see a pattern say, sew right sides together, the part of the fabric that you want to be seen is the right side. The other side of the fabric is the wrong side. So when it says right sides together, we'll take the top of one fabric, which is the right side, and the top of the other fabric, which is also the right side, and put them together. This would be right sides together, so that then when you create a stitch, you can open it and it would look like this. So we're gonna do that right now. Currently in the needle position that it's at right now, which you are able to move your needle left to right depending on your project. And again, go to your user manual to figure out when and how you would need to do that. But my needle right now is right in line with this center line, and 1/4 inch is right here. So if I put the edge of my fabric at the 1/4 inch, move it all the way back to the needle, if I sew directly down the middle where the needle is, it's gonna give me a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm gonna put this here, push my little lever to bring down my presser foot, try to line up the fabrics as best as possible. And then one thing that I like to do to make sure that I'm really in the right position is put the needle down into the fabric with my hand wheel. So I'm gonna do that now. I'm gonna turn towards me, not away from me. And now it's in the fabric. I'm gonna go a couple of stitches forward and then use my reverse stitch to go a couple rows backwards. And that just locked my stitch in place. Now I'm gonna sew all the way down. And you don't have to push your fabric or pull it. The feed dogs move it for you, but you do want to put your hand on it gently to make sure that it's going in a straight line. Because if I just turn my fabric a little bit, it'll start to go off to the other side. Now I'm losing my 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So I want to get that back. Just like driving a car. And I can see that my fabric is a little uneven, so I'm gonna stop there, do a back stitch, lift my presser foot. I'm gonna press my needle up, needle down button. And then if you have an automatic thread cutter, you can just press that button so it cuts it right there for you and you pull the fabric out. I don't have that, so I have to pull my fabric a little bit, then I'm gonna bring it up to where my thread cutter is and cut it. And then there you can see this was our bobbin thread. This was our top thread, and you can see the red peeking through where the bobbin thread is interlocking with the top thread. And if we open it up, you can't even see it. This is what the back looks like and what the front looks like. That's really most of the basics that you need to know for just about any sewing machine to get you started. If you need extra help, make sure that you look at your user manual, and you can binge watch the rest of our videos on our YouTube channel because we have tons of tutorials for you and even specific sewing machine demonstrations. If you have a sewing machine that you would like demoed, let us know in the comments and maybe we can do a step-by-step tutorial for you. I also want to know, what is your first project going to be on your sewing machine? I'd actually even love to see it. If you didn't know, we have a community group on Facebook where you can share pictures of your projects, you can ask questions, and we will answer you directly. I'll link that community group down below. We would love to have you. Happy sewing, everybody!
You're making some very concerning noises over there, and I'm really worried about your physical well-being.
I don't know why I struggle so much just opening things. All right.